I think we got all the technology pulled together. As much as we are not big fans of these online meetings, they certainly are helpful to kind of keep us going and keep people safe while we get to the other side of this pandemic. So welcome everyone that's tuned in on whatever platform you're using, YouTube, WCG TV, or what have you. And so without further ado, we'll get underway. And first item of business, Madam Clerk.
Is roll call, Your Worship. I've taken roll call and all members of council are present.
Very good, thank you. And next item then, please.
A motion to adopt this evening's agenda, Your Worship.
Moved by Councillor Chaboyer and seconded by Councillor Lupke. Any changes or additions? Not seeing any coming forward. We can call for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Next item, please.
Under the order of recognitions, Your Worship, we have a salute to the E91 Emergency Communications Team for a Teamwork Award that they won from the Association of Public Safety Communications Officials Canada. And I believe we have the Director of E911, Robert Stewart, on Teams, if we want to highlight him as well.
Very good. Come ahead, Mr. Stewart. Excellent news and great recognitions. We'd love to hear more about
it. Thank you. So my team of dispatchers in 2019 took a call for an officer, requiring an officer in one of the Manitoba First Nations communities. Manitoba First Nations Police Service officer was dispatched out to that call, and when he got there, he got in trouble. He actually was stabbed multiple times after shooting the individual that stabbed him, not fatally. My team stayed on the line with him, stayed on the phone with him, picked up all of the rest of the slack, made sure that he received backup, made sure that everything was taken care of, and backup was about 30 minutes away. So my team stayed calm and cool and collected. They were nominated for this award in 2020 for this incident, and was awarded in 2020. APCO Canada did their awards for 2020 and 2021, both at their conference in October in 2021, and we're quite proud of them. I'm quite proud of all of our staff, actually. They do a great job every day of keeping responders and the public safe.
Very good. As you know, I did send you back an email to congratulate your whole team, and certainly like you did fail to, I think for obvious purposes due to your profession, they like you to stick with first names, if at all, but I know that in the award that did come out, I think they did acknowledge the three first names of the individuals that had received the award, but having attended the E911 Center a number of times, and I think maybe some of the other councillors have as well prior to COVID, and witnessed kind of what goes on there, and you know what kind of busy and critical incidents are occurring through the E911 Center. Certainly had a greater appreciation so how they would handle this, and so knowing that all of your team could be eligible for this kind of award on many days. This was certainly a very significant incident, and great to see that was presented as a nomination and was selected, especially for the three individuals that were named, but really on behalf of what I consider to be exceptionally professional, well-equipped, well-trained E911 Center, and I don't think we ever get tired of reminding our citizens that this is not just for the city of Brandon, that you people handle E911 calls for all municipalities in the province of Manitoba outside the city of Winnipeg, and a number of police forces as well for their dispatch. So I'd like to congratulate yourself, your whole team, and especially the 3 that were named in this award. But I will open up the floor for any questions or remarks that any member of council may have. I know I may have done kind of around the kitchen of comments there on behalf of all of us, but I'd like to make sure that we have the floor open. I'm not seeing anything you wanted to add, Robert?
I don't think so. I have definitely passed your thanks and congratulations on to Vanessa and Megan and Crystal. And so thank you very much.
Oh, very good. Thank you very much for attending tonight and showcasing this, very significant award. And, it's really good news story for your whole team. And we want them to know we're grateful for their service every day, but great to see these recognitions come along once in a while. So thank you very much.
Thank you again. Have a great night.
Thank you. I don't believe under recognitions that we need a motion to accept that, do we, Madam Clerk?
No, that's correct, Your Worship. We can move on to the next item.
We can. Go ahead, please.
Under the order of minutes, Your Worship, confirmation of the minutes of the January 17th regular meeting.
Moved by Councillor Cullen, seconded by Councillor Cameron. Any errors or omissions? Not seeing any, so I think we're ready for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Thank you. Next item, please.
Under the order of delegations, Your Worship, we have Mr. Derek Cullen from Meehan Haddad on behalf of members of the taxi industry with a presentation regarding potential taxi bylaw requirements and possible amendment to the bylaw.
Very good. Welcome, Mr. Cullen, and I'll turn it straight over to you, and you can have the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yep, very good.
Thank you. My name, I know most of you, some personally, some professionally, some I'd rather not know, Mr. Fawcett. My name is Derek Cullen. I'm a lawyer at Meehan Haddad in Brandon. I have been retained by ABC Taxi to make a presentation to council. Under their umbrella, I'm also counsel, I should disclose, for Brandon Sunset Taxi, four-way taxi are clients of mine. I represent a couple of transit and charter companies as well in Brandon, so a lot of my clients are behind this, and I know a bit about it. The current taxi bylaw that you have mandates that taxis get a twice annual inspection by MPI, and they actually have to get a certificate of inspection every 6 months. But more importantly, and of concern to the taxi industry, is that your current bylaw mandates that regardless of that safety status, once a vehicle is 10 years old, it's legislated off the road. It's the taxi company's position and mine that is somewhat arbitrary. It's the 10 years is redundant in light of the semi-annually inspection, and quite frankly, it's analogous to beauty pageant standards in what should be a skills competition. You certainly have legislative authority to make a taxi bylaw. However, when I read yours, it actually apparently draws its authority, or claims to draw its authority, from the Highway Traffic Act. That's actually been repealed several years ago, that governing section. Now the legislation is called the Local Vehicles for Hire Act of Manitoba. So the Highway Traffic Act, from which you drew the power for the old bylaw, has actually been repealed. And so if you're reconsidering, you should look at the Local Vehicles for Hire Act, which actually gives you the authority to set, quote, standards. One of the problems is that all laws have to have a purpose. We don't just pass laws for no particular reason. And if we do find that they have a purpose, we look at that purpose and we have to make sure that laws are not either arbitrary, unfair, discriminatory, and so on. The purpose here, of course, is to regulate safe and hopefully affordable private transit to probably complement the public transit system for those that either don't have a car, those that aren't comfortable or aren't able to use public transit, Sometimes public transit stops running at 11 o'clock at night. There's impaired drivers out there who should have access to a taxi. So the legislative purpose is safe, complement to public system, hopefully affordable. These are valid and important societal goals. So there's no question that there's a purpose. But then we go to the second part of passing legislation, is that in trying to accomplish that purpose, you can't discriminate, or in order to serve that purpose, you can't be arbitrary, you can't be unfair. And this is where the bylaw, in my opinion, and the taxi industry's opinion, strays, because if arbitrarily set a 10-year mandate that says once you hit 10 years, you're off the road, even if you've passed those semi-annual inspections required by MPI. And those certificates of inspection, the COIs, they're fairly onerous to haul your vehicle in for every 6 months. Some of you may know me. I drive as my daily driver a 39-year-old Volkswagen van. I would dread being hauled in for safety because I would never pass. But the taxi industry is regulated because they're forced to every 6 months. In addition, any officer, city employee, clerk, bylaw enforcement officer can, in their opinion, force a taxi to go in for another inspection. So there's another layer of protection. But the 10 years is probably historically based, I speculate a little bit, probably historically based on the assumption that a 10-year-old vehicle is no longer safe. Of interest, the average vehicle in Canada, I looked it up before I got online, is around 10 years old. The average vehicle on the road is 10 years old. In the United States, it's 12 years old. I found the city garage, by the way. Some city buses running every day carrying 20 to 40 passengers are well in excess of 10 years old. So if they say it's not safe to have a vehicle that's 10 years old on the road, well, then you better haul some buses that hold 20 to 40 passengers off the road. They too are subject to that same semi-annual inspections. So when I talk about the laws, remember it has to have a purpose, and the purpose is to regulate a safe taxi industry, of course, and hopefully affordable as a complement. The 10 years doesn't apply to that because it's based on an assumption. As I said in my opening remarks, it seems to be based on an assumption that 10-year-old car isn't safe. The Local Vehicles for Hire Act allows you to set standards. Now, 10 years old is a standard, but it's not a relevant standard. Like, for example, it used to be the case that employers would just lay off employees at age 65. The law has evolved to say no. You can't do that because age isn't an accurate measure of worker skills anymore. Likewise, we used to just yank driver's licenses at age 80. Again, those laws have evolved. We don't do that anymore because age is not a measure of driver safety. For those of you seen me drive, I'm actually a terrible driver. I'm not as safe as many 80-year-olds. But if you can pass as an 80-year-old, or Derek Cullen, if I can pass the vision and acuity test, I get to drive. They don't put an age on it. Now, they have a minimum age of 16 because there's a minimum level of maturity and competence to run it, but they don't age out. So to a taxi, if you pass that inspection, semi-annually inspection, you should be able to continue past the 10 years. So here's the proposal. And by the way, I've looked at bylaws from several cities across the country, Kenora, Regina, Winnipeg, et cetera, Brandon seems to be a little bit unique. Others have a nuanced application of this. The proposal that I'm suggesting, backed by my client, is that if you get a vehicle registered before 10 years, provided you keep making those inspections, you can continue 11, 12, 13 years. We're not saying you should be able to show up at the counter at City Hall and register a 13-year-old vehicle. But if you've already got one registered and it's in the regime, you should be able to continue. See, the current practice of a taxi company is you buy a 3 or 4-year-old vehicle, hopefully low kilometers, but with the cost of licensing, maintenance, gas, insurance, your permit, the semi-annual inspection, which inevitably finds things, it's fairly onerous. And then if the city just arbitrarily hauls them off the road after another 4 or 5 years, regardless of their safety standards, It's going to be onerous on the drivers. It's going to push the prices up, which kind of defeats the purpose, which again is safe, hopefully affordable complement to the public transit system. Practically speaking, the economics is going to take these cars off the road. They don't need to be legislated off the road. A 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old high mileage vehicle that has to pass these tests is going to be uneconomical to run. You don't have to legislate it off the road just arbitrarily. So as I said at the beginning, the current bylaw is antiquated. It applies what is basically, and I'll use the analogy again, beauty pageant standards to a fitness competition. And believe me, a 10 or 12-year-old Toyota Prius is no beauty. But if that contestant can pass the fitness competition, she should still be able to compete. So those are the submissions of council. I know I'm limited to 10 minutes, but I think I can have made the points. Now, the problem we've got is you've got an antiquated bylaw. There is a process to amend bylaws. You can't just snap your fingers tonight to adjust it. I understand at the end of this month, many 10-year-old vehicles are being legislated off the road. So I might suggest that council probably has the authority to suspend the 10-year enforcement, provided they continue to have the semi-annual inspection while you properly consider the bylaw. Again, it's antiquated because it even refers to authority coming from the Highway Traffic Act, which doesn't even apply anymore. You're coming from the Local Vehicles for Hire Act. So you got some tidying up and some housekeeping to do with your own bylaws. And while you're at it, I'm suggesting on behalf of the industry that you extend it to 15 years, provided you meet those conditions. So those are my comments, subject to any questions you may have, if there's even an opportunity for that.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Cullen. Not only very informative presentation, but at times colorful as well. And I already do have a number of hands up, so we'll get started there. Starting with Councillor Parker, then Cameron, then Fawcett.
Thank you, Worship, through you to Mr. Cullen. Just a couple of questions that came to mind, and you may have touched on a little bit, but would your clients consider going to sort of a step program? You know, maybe 0 to 10 years old, they stick with the 10 months, and then vehicles exceeding 10 to 15 years, they go to a quarterly or a tri-annual inspection system. Have they talked about anything along that lines too?
No, I haven't considered that. And actually, the semi-annual inspection it's a mandate of the city, but I know where you got it from, because that mirrors MPI's commercial vehicle inspection mandates. Semis, ambulances, buses, and so on have to go in every 6 months. So it just follows lockstep with that. And I anticipate that's why council just kind of mirrored that. So I hadn't considered that option, but whether you bring your vehicle in triannually, that is every 4 months or every 6 months, isn't really going to change the threshold issue, which is why are we hanging our hat on 10-year-old vehicles at all? Isn't safety the issue? And I see where you're coming from. Well, maybe if we inspect them every 4 months instead of every 6, it's not going to make them any safer. It'll catch some safety maybe 2 months earlier, but that really is an inefficient method of hammer.
Right, and I agree. It might be, as you said, it's an onerous system, and it may be a little bit more costly, but cheaper than replacing the vehicle at 10 years on the flip side. So what about another benchmark then being mileage?
Well, I'll ask the redundant question. Is a senior who's driven 1 million kilometers any more competent than a senior who's driven 100,000 kilometers? It's the same arbitrariness. It has nothing to do with safety. You're assuming a high mileage vehicle is less safe. I drive a exceptionally high mileage Volkswagen van that has never left me stranded. Well-maintained high mileage vehicles are just a product of the industry.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Cameron, then Fawcett.
Great. Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Cullen. Appreciate the presentation this evening. Did a little bit of that reading it myself, found out that sort of 10-year mark in Canada, 12 in the United States. And only comparable city that had a bylaw that had that 10-year threshold was City of Saskatoon, that I was able to track down. My question this evening is, should council, ultimately, there will be a consideration on this, but if council wasn't willing to consider the change on this, do you have a rough idea of how many vehicles in the industry this would impact locally?
Good question. Here's all I can do is make some rough calculation based on the age of the vehicles. So I canvassed my clients. Their vehicles are necessarily around 4 years to 10 years old, because you legislate them off the road at 10. There's none older. And so a 4 to 10 year vehicle, so that's 6 year span. That means every year about a sixth of the vehicles are coming off the road every single year. Because if you have a 6 year lifespan between 4 and 10, every year, a sixth. So you know better than I how many taxis there are, but a sixth every year is going to drop off simply because you decided that a 10-year vehicle is not as safe as a 9-year vehicle.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
You're going to have Councillor Fawcett and then Councillor Desjardins.
Right on. Thank you. Can we refer to you as Council Cullen?
Yeah. For today's purposes, Councillor Cullen is Barry. Council Cullen is Derek.
That's right. You've almost made it. Has your group addressed this with our taxi bylaw committee?
That's what they've initiated me for in the last couple of weeks. They haven't. And the first step is to draw council's attention to it, because if there's the taxi committee has no power to change that bylaw. Only you do. So.
Okay. I just was wondering about process. And so definitely just with some of the points you've made there, we need to look at it for certain. So I think at this point here, we'll go through the process. I don't know if that actually means Heather would be able to tell us if this does go to taxi bylaw requirements, and then they bring it back to us, or however we do it. But obviously there's some things that need to be updated, and we can discuss your proposal going forward. I just had wondered if we had heard of it before and just hadn't got all the way to council. This is our first hearing.
Here's anecdotally, I understand some of my drivers have expressed frustration to the people on the front lines there, but they rightfully came to me to understand the process, and that's why we're here. So your taxi people may have heard of it, but it may have not made its way up the food chain.
Good. No, that's good. You can probably head home from work here shortly.
I am still at my desk in my suit, if you noticed.
I see that.
Okay, Councillor Desjardins, and then Councillor Lukey, and then I think our city clerk has something she can add. Go ahead, Councillor Desjardins.
Yeah, through your worship to the presenter, and just a quick point of information, there are certainly cities that have shorter durations for taxis to be on. Councillor Cullen probably found a couple of those, but I wouldn't think he'd be bringing those up today. But Timmins, Ontario went from 5 to 7, but there is a 7 years. It used to be 5. And there are some in, I think, London, Ontario, in 2021, they were at 12, then they're going down to 11, and they're eventually going down to 10. And the reason why cities and municipalities are doing stuff like that is emission standards. So I think what we're trying to say, Derek, is that the longer a vehicle's on the road, the worse it is for the environment. But you're suggesting to me that might not be the case, that the longer a vehicle's on the road doesn't necessarily mean it's harder on the environment?
Well, I'm not sure if you've thrown me a softball or not, but it's actually better to run a vehicle for 12 to 15 years than throw them in the junkyard every 5. They all have to meet the same Manitoba emissions standards. And again, a vehicle that becomes uneconomical for fuel efficiency to run, they're going to pull them off the road themselves. So I'll counter your point that even though it might get slightly worse gas mileage, for the environment as a whole, you're better to run a vehicle till it's death than pull them off every 5 years.
Okay, thank you. And I have Councillor Lukey.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Mr. Cullen. I just kind of assume that one of the reasons why it's gone from being under the Highway Traffic Act to the Vehicles for Hire Act is with the advent of services like Uber and Lyft and those type of services from a provincial level. And I'm just wondering if we were to take a look at our taxi bylaw, my sense would be we look at the entire thing and not just specific segments of it. So what's the industry's thoughts on Uber, Lyft, and some of those other type of services?
Well, there's kind of two parts. I'm not sure if the first part was a question or a comment. I don't have that information. I can't make the assumption that in 2017, which is when they started debating the Local Vehicles for Hire Act in the Hansard and the legislature, they had the forethought about Uber. It probably existed 5 years ago. Certainly wasn't on Manitoba's radar. So I doubt that's what drove it. I think just a review of legislation in general every few years drives it. But I think the city's going to be facing this imminently, because what's going to happen is you are going to start seeing, well, they do exist in Brandon. Uber happens in Brandon. You just don't know about it. If I wanted, I could have an Uber pick me up at the office tonight. So it's there. And so the city's going to be forced to deal with this in short order. Uber Winnipeg authorizes its drivers to bring people to Brandon for $200 and change for up to 4 people right now. They can bring them into the city and drop them at the McDonald's on the North Hill, and there's nothing you can do about it. So it's real. It's going to be in the city's face any day, and I think it would behoove the city and be prudent for the city to deal with it proactively rather than reactively, trucker convoy style.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. And I forgot to make a comment. I admire your courage for stating that your daily driver wouldn't pass safety and that you're a terrible driver in public space.
It wouldn't.
The other question I did have, through your worship again, to our presenter, I know Winnipeg is currently going through some changes in their vehicles for hire bylaw that deal with more with conduct of drivers.
Yes.
I'm just wondering if you had seen that and what your thoughts are on something like that. Like I said, if we're going to kind of review this, then I think we're going to review it totally and not just segments of it.
Sure. Very good question. I have had firsthand experience with the conduct of driver legislation. There was I want to say about a year and a half ago, my timeline might be off, but around a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, there was a team of law enforcement came out from Winnipeg and set up, I call it entrapments, for some Brandon drivers. And many were caught in this sting operation. And then they were used, the conduct of those drivers caught in these, again, entrapments, to try to get them off the road. So your current bylaw does actually have fairly good teeth to deal with driver conduct. It lists, I don't have them off the top of my head, but it lists several examples of where city clerk can deny a permit for your drivers based on criminal history, overall moral conduct, and so on. I would encourage you to tweak that a little bit because, again, we're talking some beauty pageant standards where we're talking about legislating morality when it may otherwise be legal and so on. So if you're going to look at it, you already have the teeth in there, but wouldn't hurt to tweak it. I don't know what Winnipeg's doing. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll ask Ms. Iwazic to go ahead, please, Heather.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to confirm, based on Councillor Fawcett's comments, that Mr. Cullen is correct in that the way the taxi committee is set up within the bylaw, it acts as an appeal body for the issuance of driver permits or driver licenses based on an issue that has been raised with our licensing department. Some of your drivers that you represent, Mr. Cullen, have in fact come to our office and expressed some concerns. So we directed them from council on how we wanted to proceed. A bylaw is due for an overhaul, a complete review. I believe it's been probably at least 10 years.
Thank you for that, Madam Clerk. Go ahead, Derek.
If I may, well, I want to thank, rather than make 20 separate pages to cancel 3, 4, 5 different tax accounts, collectively band together and make an appropriate approach to council for the 10 or 15 minutes I've been allotted here. And so the message I want to send to council is you have cooperation and support from the industry, not necessarily opposition. They would like to work with you for this and be engaged in a consultative capacity in whatever going forward, either through me or directly. Some of them are quite eloquent, some are not. And so I just want to say that you have the industry wanting to work with you, not against you on this issue.
Well, thanks for that. I was going to, I don't have any other hands up, so we're probably getting near the end of the questions, but I was going to acknowledge a number of years back that I, along with some members that day, they were representing themselves, so to speak, on you, Mr. Cullen, but and that was over the topic such as Councillor Lupke brought up about the kind of Uber and Lyfts and others that were kind of looking at Brandon at the time, and so they were looking, the taxi industry was concerned, and much as there probably have some misgivings about little areas of our bylaw that you're bringing up tonight, they applied the standard on a more of a level playing field. Our bylaw calls for anybody that's in the sort of vehicle for hire business has to be, a legitimate company, a dispatching office, and so on and so forth. It can't just be a one vehicle, independent operator like you would be on some of the others. And so that's kind of in other communities, of course, it's very different with the taxi industry. They've got this overhead of having their full dispatch and their full kind of office set up, and yet they're having to compete with all these one-offs. So there's sort of two sets of rules in most other communities, and we kind of maintain one. These others can come in if they can fit into our traffic bylaw or taxi bylaw as it is. So we'll probably have a look at the whole thing. We would enjoy getting the feedback from the industry, as we always do, and you've done a good job of coalescing that, and it should work well. So before I'll just make sure that I don't have any other councillors that had any other questions or comments. Seeing any, so I'll just let you close out unless you had any closing.
No, comments. the only comment I make is at the end of this month, 20% or something like that of your taxi fleet is off the road, because they're going to be delayed while we go around this merry-go-round to appease some of whom are probably waiting tonight, whether we just suspend enforcement of the 10 years, if that's council's wish. I leave it to council to help us in that regard. Otherwise, at the end of this month, we got some people out of work.
Well, very good. We'll look into that. Again, we'll get some feedback from our legislative services department. I'm guessing we would likely have to amend the bylaw to do that, but we'll see what we can do.
Thank you.
Okay, a motion to receive that presentation would be in order. If somebody would make that, please. You're still muted. I know I caught you off guard there, but.
Sorry, my document closed. My agenda document closed. Someone else can go ahead and read that off.
Okay. Councillor Cameron, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. I'll do this on behalf of Councillor Parker. I move that the presentation by Derek Cullen on behalf of me and Haddad with respect to the taxi bylaw requirements be received.
Thank you. Seconder, please. Councillor Frangie. Any discussion? Not seeing any. We will ask administration to look into this as quickly as we're able. And I think we're ready for the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Next item, please.
The order of committee reports, Your Worship.
So we weren't made aware of any in advance. Okay. Not seeing any hands up. Just in between committee meetings. So we can move on to the next item, please.
The order of inquiries, Your Worship.
Very good. Inquiries. We start with Councillor Lupke.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have two tonight. I know one was sent in time for a response. I also put one in earlier today. So my first inquiry, many residents are adding security lighting to their properties as a means to deter crime, which I believe neighbors, especially if the lights are improperly lights, the motion sensor is sensitive or improperly pointed, causing the lights to be turning on repeatedly in the nuisance bylaw? And if not, could that the review that is currently taking place?
Thank you very much for that. I'll pass over. He's ready for a response from our city manager, Ron Bowles.
Thank you, Councillor Lupke, through Mayor Crust. This response is provided by Heather Wozniak, Director of Legislative Services / the City Clerk. And Ms. Wozniak goes on to say the issue of light pollution has been deliberated on several occasions over the years. A number of years ago, the issue was reviewed by the Planning Department and was rules and regulations to control the use of outdoor illumination and to minimize light trespass on all properties other than public right-of-ways. Adoption of the bylaw. Concerns were raised related to enforcement of the proposed bylaw in regards to after-hours enforcement when city zoning bylaw does address lighting requirements for commercial zones and with respect to signs. However, is currently silent on residential lighting. Potential restrictions can be re-examined as part of the current review of the nuisance bylaw that's going on right now by administration. Thank you, Mayor Crest.
On this myself, that there's been several cities that have lighting bylaws within the last 12 months. So it makes me curious if the new age of lighting makes it a little bit more important than perhaps it was in past years. But appreciate that response and look forward to seeing what happens with this review and if we want to include something to do for snow clearing. Thanks not necessarily to the quantity, but certainly due to the frequency. I've noted that many of what I would call our high traffic secondary streets, such as Princess, Rosser, and Pacific, are currently in what our condition thanks to packed down snow and running. In addition, there are many streets in intersection where snow piles are concerned whether they're affecting parking options or sight lines. Do we have a plan in place to?
Very good. Again, I'll come back to Mr. Bowles. Not sure whether this was a little later come up with a response. As well. You may have something to add, but you go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Crest, and through you to Councillor Lupke. I dive into this a little bit, and I just ask General Manager Pulak if he's able to weigh in. If not, we'll have to take this under advisement and get back to council shortly.
I don't have any details on what they're planning going forward at the moment, and I certainly will take it under advisement and provide that information to council tomorrow. That said, I am planning a review of our snow clearing procedure, but probably won't be in effect till next year, but certainly taking a good long look at how we how we do our snow clearing and how we disseminate that information out to the public.
And thanks for that, Patrick. I can appreciate that. I guess what I'm asking is if we're planning on doing something in the next week or two, because it's not great driving out there right now, and that's a concern for me. And certainly I don't know much about the snow clearing operation, but I do know the weather forecast for the next 2 weeks is not calling for much snow, so this might be an opportune time to do some work. So I'll just leave it at those comments and appreciate whatever you can get back to us with here in the next couple of days.
Thanks, Councillor Lupke. Again, very timely question. Certainly it has been a challenging year. In my view, they've been out a lot, but as you put it in the early part of your inquiry, the frequency has been an issue. Sometimes they've not even got finished cleaning up from one snowfall and another one has started, so it's been practically non-stop, endless operation. So we will ask for administration to give us an update as to kind of where they're at and what they're planning on doing on the days and weeks moving ahead. So thanks for raising that. And
my question is, with the extreme weather, which Councillor Lupke talked about, and the heavy snowfalls and the frequency of the snowfalls in combination with the extreme cold we've had for large parts of the winter. In those conditions, in combination with all of the COVID-19 protocols and such, self-isolation, work from home, many of the residents, or a lot of residents in my ward, and I'm sure others, without front drives, are still required to have their vehicles parked in front of their house, but often there is no need to exit their homes. Either they're self-isolating or the requirement's not there because of work from home. A lot of those folks, their backyards, if they do even have parking via the back lane, is limited due to the snow as well, and the large amounts of snow. So anyway, several vehicles folks have been required to leave their vehicles on the road for longer than the 48 hours and have been receiving tickets. So my question was, do we have the ability, do our bylaws officers have the ability to issue warning tickets and or be a little more compassionate, show a little more leniency in some of these situations? A lot of the people that are being don't necessarily wouldn't fall into the abuser category. So
Thank you for that. And again, we'll call on Mr. Bowles for a response that he has prepared.
Thank you. Through Mayor Kress to Councillor Parker, I really appreciate the question, and I repeat council can do that. So this answer is provided by Wayne Belkin, Chief of Police. And Sir Belkin says, we appreciate the concern raised and that of your ward constituents. This winter has been all of what you indicate. However, it is not abnormal for Manitoba, with the exception of the COVID restrictions that you talk about. We are often in a deep freeze for the months of December, January, February with large snowfalls, but have been spoiled in the last few winters. While we empathize with you and individuals who have been contacting you, this is a citywide suggestion from Mr. Belkin that this is best addressed at the council table, and that a change to the bylaw, if that is the general consensus of council. Our bylaw officers, like police officers, have some discretion, and this discretion is used when the situation dictates. They are expected to enforce the bylaw as it is written, so it is done so consistently with fairness to all. We are presently reviewing our traffic bylaw with collaboration between the Brandon Police Services. Of this on the flip side, we are into a week of warmer temperatures that are going to be at or above zero, and this should be a good opportunity for people to clean off their vehicles and move them around to avoid tickets. Notwithstanding, we're at council's pleasure. Thank you. Chris?
Thank you for that response. I just wonder if perhaps I can have administration provide myself and council colleagues with a list of any options that are available for citizens by way of temporary permits or residential parking permits or something along that line, if there is anything, and if not, maybe it's something we can look at when we look at the bylaws.
Very good. They can have a look at it, and some short-term fix for very immediate, but that is sometimes a position that we're placed in with.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I brought up a similar inquiry in December and did talk about whether we would be, help with some of these issues, whether it's work from home or isolation, what have you. And I believe in the response that there was going to be council in February of this year. So perhaps there might be a little bit behind on that, but that's probably, I would guess, what the chief is talking about when he says it's currently being reviewed.
Okay, but again, some do come up later in the day, so if there are additional ones, we could take those now.
No.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think that has the inquiries covered, so thanks everybody for those. And okay, order of announcements. Councilor Terry, go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. I'd like to inform residents of Brandon and the Linden Lanes Board that we're going to be holding the Myers Norris Penny Hall at the Keystone Center. The public hearing is with the possible representation and proposed conversion of Aberdeen Avenue from Durham Drive to 34th Street to be made into a one-way street. This was a topic that was brought up both in my ward meeting from last October and in presentation by residents in December, at which time council approved a lower speed limit for that street. And this was another, have to follow the provincial health order to Keystone Center has to force, and that includes all persons attending must show proof of vaccination and have photo ID when they enter the premises. And masks are mandatory when they're in the building itself and in the meeting itself, unless they're speaking and they wish to take it off. So again, that's Thursday, February 17th, 7 p.m. in the Myers North Penny Hall, the Keystone Center, for the public hearing to convert Aberdeen to a one-way street to 34th. It'll be of great interest to people from the Brookwood area, and also for the people that live in Durham Drive, Harrington Crescent, and around that. I certainly encourage people to come up so the council can hear people's opinions and concerns on this. Since the notice of posting went out on Saturday that I put out, I've had several comments and emails from people in Brandon. I'm not sure if they all live in the area, but everybody's entitled to their opinion, and that's fine. But more importantly, we need to get people out to the public hearing. In that,
Councillor Berry and
Your Worship, it's a night of public hearing notices here. Just wanted to give University Ward residents the heads up of a notice of public hearing for the proposed development at 415 25th Street. This development has gone through a public meeting, but this would be the hearing portion for portions of the development, which would be a 48-unit affordable housing development on that property. The hearing is Tuesday, February. This is an event that you must pre-register for, and it'll either be delivered through Teams or in person, depending on what the provincial public health orders allow at the time. If residents do have any questions, they can reach out to the planning department by emailing planning@brandon.ca or calling 729-2110. Once again, that's a public hearing on the proposed development at 415 25th Street.
thank you, Councillor. And any other announcements? Might just wouldn't have to draw people's attention to the Olympics. I think many people have are glued to their TV sets whenever they can. It's pretty near around the clock. When you did an interview with CTV News the other day about the Team Canada women's hockey team, and that we have a local in Brandon. I think they live just outside the city of Brandon, but certainly comes from our area, and very excited. And of course, one of the most high-profile for Canadians, at least, that women's hockey section, and I believe an important game tonight as they face rivals U.S. team, I think at something like 9:45 tonight. So again, congratulations to Kristen Campbell and her family, and we're certainly wishing her and the whole team all the best at the Olympics. And before we move on, not seeing any others. And next item, Madam Clerk.
Placement.
And Councillor Foster, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you, through your worship, that the low bid from Sky City Roofing Limited to complete the Brandon Sportsplex roof replacement as per tender and specification for a total bid price of $166,508.96 be accepted. And further, that 70% sure funding is available to complete the project, and further, the total expected project cost of $1,571,660 be expended from the Sportsplex reserve. As you know.
Thank you. A seconder, please.
I'll second it.
Councillor Spoyer. Councillor Foster, would you like to speak, or?
Maybe we'll get the member of administration, just because it might be the odd question.
Very good. And Mr. Bowles, I wasn't sure who would be taking this one. It's going to be the general manager. Oh, no, Mr. Rock is on the line, so I think it's going to be him. Go ahead, please, Perry. You're just muted for a second there, Perry.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. So in our report, we made the recommendation that Councillor Fawcett has just brought forward on behalf of our report. Some background information: the Sportsplex was built in 1978, and the one roof on the north side was replaced in 1992, or in the 80s, and the pool portion was replaced in 1992. Both portions of the roof are well past their life expectancy and require replacement. In 2021, we retained a consultant to explore the options for replacement of the roof, and the recommendation that came back for replacement was that we maintain the current flat roof structure. When we went out for tender last fall, we had lots of input interest in the project. We got 7 compliant bids that was for this project, so we know that there are people out there that are looking at it. It's not a few. The legislation requires that under our tendering and procurement policy, council will need to approve the required contract value to accommodate within the current year budget. We don't have that, as there's not a sufficient amount of funds, so we do need the approval of council. This was one of the strategic plans that we have with the city, is to maintain the infrastructure, and the Sportsplex is one of our key recreation facilities in the city of Brandon that's owned and operated by the city of Brandon. So some of the risks that we could incur at the present time is we could have more damage to the facility if it's not completely replaced due to the ongoing leaking. And right now, last week we had extremely cold weather, but as we have warmer weather start to happen, the old membrane and the roof structure, it will split and crack. So I may have repaired one spot last time, and this winter we're getting another spot that'll start leaking. And it never fails that the roof decides to leak when we're in the middle of a AAA game or we're in the middle of a hockey tournament. So then we have to interrupt or cancel programs, and the facility is closed due to the hazards, and we have to do a repair. As far as our communication strategy goes, we don't anticipate that there's going to be much interruption in the facility schedule, and we expect that once the contract has been awarded and the schedule has been established, administration will communicate any interruptions in service to our users of the facility and the public. So we do recommend that the low bid submitted by Sky City Roofing Limited be carried out to replace the Sportsplex roof as per the tender specifications at the cost of $1,366,508.96. Be accepted, and that the $70,000 from the project to ensure funding is available to complete the project, and the total expenditure of the project cost of $571,660 be expended from the Sportsplex reserve.
Thank you very much, Barry. But we'll open up the floor for questions. I've got a couple of hands up already. So Councillor Cameron, then Councillor Cullen.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Rock. Thanks very much for the presentation, Perry. Just wondering, with regards to the tendering process, obviously always the way that happens with procurement, but I do know potentially upwards of, well, it's over $500,000 swing between the tendering low and higher ends of the bids. I'm just wondering, looking at the Sportsplex being a 42-year-old facility, is it sort of apples and apples comparison? Each company would warranty them the same, or is that was that sort of a variation in the bid process?
Required to replace the roof to the same standard and provide the same warranty coverages that we would expect. So all of those tenders should be similar and to be non-compliant and then removed from the competition.
Perfect. And if I may follow up, Your Worship, being that it does the warranty on something like that last the same as you would with a residential building? Is it like a 20 to 25 year window? I'm just thinking because end goal of that Sportsplex to the end timeline is potentially a 60-year-old facility. So just wondering what kind of timeline we could hope to expect out of a roof replacement there.
When we spoke with the consultant regarding that, he said the life expectancy of a roof of that nature would be about 25 years.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. And Councillor Cullen is next.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Mr. Rourke. What type of timeline are we looking for, starting early spring and ending by what time? How long do you feel that this would take?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Cullen. In the tender documents, we asked that the roof completion be completed by September. So as soon as it's awarded, we want them to be ordering their materials and supplies and starting to get them shipped to get the work done.
And just, you have to excuse my ignorance, but the process when you say it's a complete roof replacement and just sort of like shingles on a regular roof, where we wouldn't be exposed to the elements, or are we talking about, when we say replacing the roof, are we talking open skies at some point in some areas of the building? What are we looking at there?
Yeah, and that's an excellent question. And that was one of the things we did discuss, is that there are some components such as the blue styrofoam insulation. If it's good underneath the product, it will get reused. And we're having that reused because that's environmentally friendly for the city and for our community. We don't want to rip the whole roof off and then put a whole new roof. We're only going to be replacing the styrofoam that is damaged either by water or contaminated and can't be used. But the rest of it will be reused, and the gypsum board that's underneath it, that will be replaced as required. So the consultant has written that right into the tender documents. That's to try and keep our pricing down as much as we possibly can and being environmentally responsible.
Okay, thank you.
I think to Councillor Cullen's main question, Mr. Rock, they're replacing the sort of the roof deck, so there's not ever going to be
metal deck. That's the inside portion of the building. That won't be replaced. They'll be working on top of that. The replacement of the roof, and then move on to the next section. And there are joints where they can do a section and remove it. We don't want the whole roof removed at one time, in the fear that we have a severe rain and then we're going to have all that water coming through, so that they do it in sections to protect the building.
And Councillor Fawcett.
Yeah, thank you, through your worship. I've got some comments as well as a question here, but we did ask you, staff, to go back and look at other options for this, because we know there is less expensive options that we could have considered. Tender back as we had 2 weeks ago. The other question I have, and I do have a little bit of concerns on this, and just a general tender concern. We had 7 bids, which is great. And I'd like to say we had 6 competitive bids, because the second lowest to the sixth, to the between 2 and 7, $327,000 difference. That's pretty tight between 6 bids. Between 1 and 2, than the other ones. My concern attached to that is, just as always, have we done our thorough look at it? I know with the Sportsplex history, we have the track, which we continually had to get people back from Montreal, and I don't know if we'll ever get them to finish their warranty work. The pool was another great big one. Continually had to get people back from out of town, and warranty work and all kinds of issues. But do we have confidence with this much lower bid? And we don't need to come back again. We seem to have to close the Sportsplex on a regular basis, and I worry about. Maybe this is more not to yourself, but more to procurement. They were 100% confident in always the lowest bid. I know that's the way we do it, but on the competitive bid end, that they can do this.
Yes, there is. And I'll explain to you why that is. When we started the process, we realized that the roofing and replacement of the Sportsplex roof is not our area of expertise. And that is why we went out to retain a consulting firm that works in the roofing business. The firm that we retained, which is Fishburne Sheridan, and they're out of Ottawa. One of the reasons we selected them was they have done work here in Brandon, and they've done work specifically with the Brandon Regional Health Center. They were pleased. The pricing was good. They kept them on track. They did good work, and they made sure the contractors did it properly. So as part of this consulting, now that we say we award it, I'm still not an expert just because I've said we're going to award the contract. The consultant is still part of his job is to ensure, and they're going to be here to do inspections to make sure the work's done properly and stays on track. And then they'll be the ones that'll say, yeah, that can be a change order can be put in, or no, you need to do this way because that's the way it was tendered out. So we're confident that the consultant will be able to provide that service for us.
Okay, well, yeah, that's good. I'm glad that we're doing our due diligence there, and I hope that is the case.
Thank you very much. And I've got Mr. Pulak that wants to add in. Go ahead, please.
Through your worship to Councillor Fawcett, of your question there really should be aimed at procurement. In the 30 years that I've done projects, and we go with the low bid, I'd say the vast majority of them you tend to run into issues, whether it be with the contractor, the general contractor, or change orders, or I've rarely come across a project that didn't go smoothly, and that's hence why we put in a contingency into these projects for these unknown factors that come up. But I would add what Mr. Rogers was saying was that typically when we hire a consultant to oversee these projects, they hold them to the specifications of the document. And as much as I'd like to say to you that I have absolute faith that nothing will happen in this project or there won't be delays, it's the nature of project work that I can't offer you that promise.
Yeah, I understand. Appreciate it.
Thanks for adding in that, Mr. Pulak. And I'm not seeing any other hands up. So thank you very much, Mr. Rock, for joining us and going over that quite thoroughly. And back to the motion on the... Not seeing any other. Would the mover wish to close?
Sure, Your Worship. In closing, I'm not going to bother reiterating what I just said, but I do hope we have it monitored quite closely. We've had two quite significant projects done up at the Sportsplex in the last number of years, and both of them have had a significant impact on coming back and coming back and coming back. I really, really hope we can avoid that on this project.
Very good then. I think we're ready for the question. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Next item, please.
It's consideration of a report regarding Vision Zero guidelines.
Very good. So this is going to be more of initially a presentation and information to council. So we'll let administration that pulled that together come ahead. It looks like it's going to be.
And to the rest of council. Apologies, I know this was brought forward in the fall of last year, and we're finally here to present some information on Vision Zero. Our original report was almost 7 pages long, so I felt it best that we cut that back. And my hopes are that you can see the screen that reads Vision Zero. What's it all about? Is a philosophy that deals with fatalities and serious injuries on the road or overall transportation network, and the fact that those fatalities and serious injuries are in fact preventable. The only acceptable number of fatalities and serious injuries between all road users. However, really, some of that philosophy has been challenged, where they feel when they use the term a shared responsibility, it may be nobody takes enough responsibility. So they're actually looking at what that means. But there certainly is an increased responsibility to those who design and maintain our roadways. Vision Zero started in 1997 with the Swedish Parliament with a long-term goal and strategy for road safety. Again, the goal that no one be killed or seriously injured resulting from a road accident. Some of the successes that they've recognized in Sweden over now approximately 25 years, and again, some of these are at a very high level. Many roads have been equipped with central barriers, thereby eliminating the risk of head-on collisions. So probably concrete jersey barriers that split by cameras, and whether that is issuing tickets or other sorts of cameras that post your road junctions have been replaced with roundabouts. Brandon is certainly familiar with roundabouts, and I think we will consider to look at the benefits in safer cars. So it's not just the local municipal jurisdiction or the government, the local governments. It's a larger picture, and the traffic environment in urban areas is designed with the focus on the vulnerable road users. In a lot of cases, those are pedestrians and cyclists and such. Vision Zero started in Canada not till about 2015, where Edmonton was the first city. Province of British Columbia followed suit in 2016, in 2016, province of Manitoba in 2017. I find often we're kind of the little brother to the Saskatoon, and just for information, Saskatoon, some of the vision that is acceptable, fatalities and serious injuries are preventable. Mistake, and we all are physically vulnerable when we're involved in a motor vehicle collision. And again, especially those that are maybe not in a motor vehicle, such as cyclists, pedestrians, motorcyclists, and the such. In every situation, a person might fail. The road system, however, should not fail. Making Vision Zero a success. So what are some of the key indicators to have some success? Obviously, there needs to be a commitment. Vision Zero is not just simply based. It takes multidisciplinary leadership. You'll see a little bit further on in the presentation. There's education, there's engagement, there's enforcement, all those types of things. So it's an all-encompassing approach from senior levels of leadership. It's a system-based approach. So from the perspective of equity, again, I think history vehicles or the kind of movement of vehicles, I think Vision Zero, the system-based approach, is more on equity and the equal rights of movements of pedestrians and cyclists. System-based approach would include an action plan, and some of those actions and decisions are based on. It is important, I think, that all areas of the city similar, and our decisions are based on that data and clearly defined standards and practices, and that community engagement, cooperation and collaboration of the citizens and different user groups, I think is a key to some of the success that's found in Vision Zero. Policies and practices that we may have to focus on or could be focused on, develop and maintain leadership, collaboration, and accountability. Again, emphasizing the collect and analysis of data for planning and decision-making purposes. to prioritize equity and to prioritize engagement. So communicating with the right people and identifying what the priorities and what the focuses are of your Vision Zero plan. Those within the vehicles, but safety of all road and transportation users. Safe speed management is another policy or a practice that could come out of a Vision Zero plan. And to maximize technologies, and often there are low-tech solutions out there that shouldn't be overlooked. They talk about 5 E's to accomplish Vision Zero. So 5 E's to zero is education. So it's not just about educating people on distracted driving. It's about educating people on reducing speed in school zones. It's about educating traffic safety looks like. It's not about educating about Vision Zero. It's about the fundamentals of Vision Zero. Engagement, different users, the different user groups, having those engagements, identifying priorities, identifying solutions. So Vision Zero is also about engagement. Engineering, I don't think we need to say much more about that, but through improved standards, focusing on designing for other users than just the motor vehicle, dedicated bike lanes that are actually separated from motor vehicle traffic. Some form of a Jersey barrier or that type of stuff would be kind of a Vision Zero approach. Evaluation of the options, but evaluation of success of, as you're implementing those options, getting a sense of the action policies in place. Are they in fact successful? Are they moving towards that Vision Zero of zero fatality? We can, design roads to a degree. We can post speed limits. We can educate. At the end of the day, there are still going to be those that unfortunately only learn through enforcement actions and that type of stuff. Those are the 5 E's. There are other E's that other communities have developed based on common in establishing a program as you move forward in the campaign. So a Vision Zero community, it has a political desire to take that ownership on. Again, multidisciplinary approach, community collaboration, community input, engagement groups, all that type of stuff. It's almost a cultural shift in my mind within the community of wanting to be a Vision Zero community, safe community. Key performance indicators. What are we trying to measure, and evaluation for success is all part of this. City of Toronto, this comes off of their website, and you can see the different colors here. Motorists are in orange, pedestrians are in dark blue, cyclists are in light blue, motorcyclists. So you can kind of see a trend here from 2012 down to 2021, almost 10 years of data, where there certainly is a trend towards the reduction of serious injuries in motorists and in pedestrians. So there seems to be a fair bit of success within the City of Toronto. This is another a page off of the City of Toronto website where it talks about fatalities. This one's a little bit more all over the map, but I still think that there are some general trends here of things getting a little bit smaller. Hopefully this will work. I just want to bring on, and it didn't work. And I think this is the real important part. If I can just have a second, I'm going to pop out of this just to share my other screen. This hopefully won't take that long. Here and here, and I apologize for my. this one here. So these are Toronto's emphasis areas. And so broken down from the previous slides that I've shown you, here's a little bit more detail on pedestrians, where you can see a trend in the reduction of pedestrians. And I think this is obviously combined as the deaths at the bottom and serious injuries up top. Another one is school children. So they look specifically at school zones and school children and the safety in and around those areas. Again, you can see the trends there. Fortunately, unfortunately, there are a couple of deaths in 11 and 13. But I think generally there's a trend to the reduction in providing safety for visitors. Cyclists is another one, motorcyclists. And then this is an interesting one again, aggressive driving and distractions. So it's an area that they target. And this is probably more through the engagement and education and enforcement areas where you is or areas of emphasis. So one more second here, I'm just going to pop back to my other. A few more slides. This gives you a little bit of an idea, and this was in 2019, and I think it was a summary from probably when they started, so about 3 years. 14 right turn lane redesigns, 54 signal visibility improvements, 395 playground zones. So it was that. Some of the results: 17% decrease, 21% decrease in pedestrian injuries, 29% decrease in cyclist injuries. So again, you can certainly see those trends that result from a key Vision Zero program. What's it mean for Brandon? The Will of strategic plan of we move towards a Vision Zero city and make the transportation network safe for all users. Support of the corporation, something like a citywide task force that kind of has that all-encompassing look from different departments and divisions from within the city. Standards and a focus on safety and traffic safety. We can certainly, build in some of the Vision Zero safety as well. Policies, priorities, all that type of stuff, I think are really important in what it means for Brandon. Policing and enforcement. Last page, what are the road safety issues? I think everybody kind of has a feel for what those could be. I think, as the second one here, is there data that supports or prioritizes these issues? If there are several issues out there, what's the data that kind of pushes us into the priorities that we should be looking at? Who should be nation or outside of the corporate? I think these are all people that can be part of a Vision Zero task force. And again, what is the community vision of all the different road users? So anyway, I didn't want to spend too much time on the presentation. I hope you got a and certainly happy to take any questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Allard. That was an excellent presentation. I think a few years back, so there might be a few councillors that have a little bit of prior knowledge on this, so this is certainly a timely endeavor. And I have Councillor Cullen ready to ask questions, so go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Mr. Allard. How is the province responding to this type of initiative? I see where obviously other cities have done this, but I also see that we've got some provinces that have bought in. Have you had any discussions with the province? And the reason why I'm saying that is some of the more pressing issues, and I mean, some of the councillors will make note that some of the issues that are surrounding Victoria Avenue and some of the other provincial areas in 18th Street, if we don't have their buy-in, this is going to make this a little more difficult. So I'm just kind of sort of getting a feel out if you've had any conversations provincially with these type of challenges.
Haven't had any conversations recently, but former member of the province, they had a Road to Zero 2025 that was created a few years back, and again, I think the same types of principles are itself. Their focus, unfortunately, is more on the rural road network of Manitoba. And that's not to say that, they don't capture, some of the data and that type of stuff that they might use for some of their analysis in urban areas. But I would say the majority of their focus from a road to zero for 2025. The interesting part and kind of on Richmond and very shortly, the city or the province and their consultants are coming to meet with the city of Brandon to discuss some of those issues around safety of that intersection and that type of stuff. So outside of that, I'm not aware of this Vision Zero. Not that I could find anyway. There's not a whole lot of information published about the different cities that are doing this. As again, I found Saskatoon.
Again, just as a follow-up, one of my, for example, like I know we're not getting into detail right now, but at the same time, it like the traction that Councillor Cameron had on just getting the crosswalks across from, on Victoria Avenue, in that area, and then also I've tried on several occasions for some sort of a speed change and or crosswalk identification on Fotheringham Drive across Victoria Avenue. The hotspot of traffic situation at the hotspots right now. I find that in a lot of cases they're more concerned with traffic flow than they are with traffic safety. And like you said, they're right now they seem to be concentrated on rural areas and making sure that those are taken care of. But I think we really need to make sure that they're on board, because it's a long, drawn-out process when it comes to trying to partner with them on some of the hotspots that I've been aware of. So anyway, I'll just leave it at that, and I know that that's a future conversation, but I really like this program. I really like it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Barry, followed by Councillor Fawcett.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Allard. Thank you very much for bringing this information forth, Mark. I know this spearheaded with inquiries from myself back in the late summer, early fall, and through residents' presentations and that to council about some concerns in the area amongst speeding and that in the Parkdale area in my ward. And that I'm glad to see we're taking the first steps in looking at Vision Zero. We know there is many steps in this thing. It's not just a 3-month process that here we go type thing. This council may start it, but it's probably going to fall well into next council's mandate if they want to continue with this and that. So at least we're taking the next step. So I actually have 2 questions. My first one is, what is the next steps for engineering and traffic engineering in dealing with Vision Zero here in the next maybe 6 months?
Well, I think I'll answer that in 2 parts. One, some of the activities that we're taking, and I guess it would be specifically Durham Drive, and Durham Drive is as much as we've reduced the speed, we're also using it as a bit of drive. So we have several different as far as how people are reacting to the reduced speed zone. We've been doing some recent counts as far as the volumes of traffic going through there, the volumes of traffic coming from that intersection back at 34th and Aberdeen. We're going to do different periods of enforcement. So, 40-kilometer speed zone is successful. What are the actual results of that? And I think that'll allow us to consider expanding that program if we find the success and where we should expand the success. So I think that's positive. I think the next step for Vision Zero for the city as a whole is to engage a little bit of a larger group outside of just engineering. Some of the education and engagement of getting out and engaging the community. I'm not sure what the answers are, but a group that can come together and determine some of what that is. I think city police play a very important part in this, of identifying some of the risk areas, identifying what enforcement look like going down the road. So I think it's kind of that talk and discussion about bringing a bit of a task force group together. And I guess the third one, if I can add, is that a piece of this is standards for the road network, what those look like. When other road users and that type of stuff, I think there's opportunities to build on that so we can start designing a safer road network.
Thank you. And just to follow up on a second question, Your Worship, we can be asking questions all night on this because there's a lot of information here. My second question actually revolves around the data. You kind of touched on it a bit, and it's one area that I've always been a little bit kind of, confused about when we compare things in Brandon to like Winnipeg or Toronto or Edmonton. When we're doing data collection for something like, for example, Durham Drive, right now we're doing this, we use that data to compare us with, say, a small town like Verdon, Brandon, and Winnipeg, because we're not all the same. So what your data, but those counts may not be acceptable in Brandon or Verdon. And I'm wondering how much of that is being taken into account, because I feel when we're being told that, the data says that this type of street, whether it's arterial or residential or whatever, is the numbers are acceptable. Well, what is acceptable? Because I kind of look at us a little bit different than I do the larger cities or even the smaller towns in that. So
specifically designed for Brandon would be value. Because I think it's important that the residents within Brandon identify. Every community is a little bit different, and there are similar nuances, I think, amongst that. But I think this program is about what's important to the city of Brandon. What is a priority from a perspective of cyclists versus pedestrians versus vehicles on the roadway, right? A lot of Vision Zero is the cyclists and the pedestrians always about being moving vehicle, and the pedestrians and the cyclists are secondary. But when I talk about engagement and education, it's more about you can design a system around that, right? If the residents of Brandon are big on residential areas, should be a 40-kilometer speed zone, then we move towards that. That's my thought on data. We can find other communities and what they're doing as kind of guidance, but at the end of the day, I think it comes down to what Brandon wants.
And just a quick follow-up on that, Your Worship. Thanks, Mark. I appreciate the comments. I know there's going to be lots of questions, lots of comments, lots of suggestions going for this. I'm just glad we're taking the first steps and looking forward to seeing how this thing kind of all washes out in the end, especially with this trial period with Durham and that, and kind of moving forward with Vision Zero. But thanks again for all the work on this.
Thank you, Councillor.
And Councillor Fawcett is next.
Yeah, thank you, and through Your Worship to Mark, I'm going to bring up something that he's well aware of, but publicly we'll bring it up again. 18th and Braycrest, Vision Zero seems to fit in there. Argument up around here is that we have zero vision when it comes to 18th and Braycrest along Braycrest Drive. Since we were started, and as Councillor Barry was saying, there's province and city involved in this. I would love to see where our Vision Zero, but anything done. So publicly get to remind everybody that we are looking at it.
Absolutely. I had a couple of conversations on the side. It was my thought to try and get the province engaged in helping out. This may be one of those examples where The province in a lot of cases is rurally focused, needs their network. There maybe has to be a bit of a shift in philosophy on how the city of Brandon can possibly take this on their own. The unfortunate part is all those that I spoke to 6-8 months in the past about moving this particular project forward are no longer with the province. And so it's like we have to start those conversations again, try and get this particular project back on track. Or again, the shift in the philosophy is, does the city of Brandon take this on as a top priority, which in some instances I know means funding the whole thing. So certainly something we could propose a couple more different strategies on and see how we move forward.
Yeah, I hope it is something we consider, like in the case of like a Durham Drive versus this, like we obviously had much bigger issues on 18th and Baycrest. The costs are obviously very, very different. But I just want people to know that, as much as we're building it out, and we talked to them about that, we've talked to hundreds of people up here, that it is still in the queue. It was in the print budget down the road. We're going to try and work with that. But as we work on this Vision Zero, it's a place that fits a lot of the pieces. So hopefully keep on it, please.
Okay. Yes, absolutely.
Well, thank you very much again, Mr. Allard, and those members of your team that worked on this, and will continue to work on this on our previously, and a very valuable mindset almost is probably where it starts. And if nothing else, even tonight, it'll just kind of start the conversation in a community that just in itself sort of leads to safer practices and safer behavior on all sides. So I think it's time and roll out overnight. This is going to be a little bit of a shift in some of the ways we do things, and this is certainly a good place to start. So thank you very much, and thanks again. So I will take a motion to receive this program. Councillor Berry, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. I move that the report from the Traffic and Transportation Plan.
Thank you. And second, mover wish to speak?
No, we've had a pretty good discussion on this already, Your Worship. I'll leave it there.
Very good. Any other discussion? And Councillor Chaboyer, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. I think this is an important initiative, so I'm just kind of wondering, yourself and with Council, how do we make this a priority as we've received the report now? I'd like to see some movement on it. And I would just like to comment, I know there's specific hotspots and we've all had them in our wards throughout the city. So I really think that we do need a task force like this, because it's just not one area. There's hundreds of hotspots throughout the city. So a task force like this could prioritize where we need different guidelines, or it might be changing, the speed limits in residential areas. And I like the way Mark explained it as all encompassing for the city. And I think in the best interest of the city, we should be looking at the entire city and starting up a task force like this. So what are the next steps, Your Worship?
Yeah, so obviously engineering and transportation have started provided this framework tonight, which was fairly all-encompassing, but on the part of council to get behind this, then I think we will ask them to come back to us through Mr. Bowles as to what the next steps are, and it might be adopting a policy that we want to be leading ourselves, looking at all of our transport bite off pieces of this, as was evidence. We're starting off by using of Vision Zero. So I think we're going to be well shaped up. Move ahead on this, starting now, and probably future council work in terms of how we could take action.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Chaboyer. Any other discussion before we call the question? Not seeing anything more, then we will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much. And next item, please.
Under the order of bylaws, Your Worship, number 7295, which is to authorize the borrowing of funds for the construction of the outdoor sports field complex. And note that an amendment is required prior to second and third reading.
Very good. I've got Councillor Parker. Go ahead.
Expenditure of funds for the construction of an outdoor sports field complex amended by 1. Inserting after the first whereas clause the following. 174.11. The council must give public notice before giving first reading to a borrowing bylaw that authorizes the municipality to A. Issue debenture and B. Use the money borrowed to fund a capital project that has been included in the financial plan adopted under section 162. And 2. In clause 4 and clause 6, deleting 2022 to 2031 and substituting therefore 2023 to 2032.
A seconder for that amendment, please. And Councillor Lupke, thank you. This is a little bit of kind of housekeeping that I think comes back to us from municipal board before we have these approved. Any discussion on these amendments? Opposed? That is carried. And now we can carry on and give it second reading as amended. Go ahead, Councillor Parker.
Thank you. That the bylaw number 7295 as amended be read a second time.
Seconded by Councillor Lupke. Who wishes to speak?
No, I don't think so, Your Worship. We've discussed this at length at different times, and I think we're ready to move on and do our part of the outdoor sports field.
Yeah, I think the public knows that we're very pleased to have received funding from the federal and provincial levels of government to go ahead and construct this outdoor field sport complex, which would be this borrowing bylaw. It's administration's intention to have that put in place so that when the point in time been approved and identified, just to kind of keep things obviously neat and tidy. So we're not obviously quite starting yet, but all of the...
Yeah, and we authorized, I think, initially up to $6 million, but that's not going to be the amount required at the end of the day, is the way I understand it. It's because of the $8 million from different levels of government and our $11 million kind of price line that we looked at. So we should be down in the $3 and $3.5 million range.
We would sure hope so.
Yeah.
So any further discussion before we call the question on second reading? Being none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Third reading would be in order. Go ahead, Councillor. And again by Councillor Lupke. Any other discussion before we give it third reading? Seeing none, and as it is third reading, a recorded vote is required. So all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And please, go ahead, please.
Thank you, through your worship. I move that bylaw number 7324 to rezone property located at 309 Princess Avenue be read a first time.
Thank you. Second, please. Councillor Cameron. Thank you. And again, first reading is not normally debatable. It just gets the process started. So we're going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Thank you very much. And next item, please.
Giving of notice.
I'm not seeing any tonight. And next item, please.
A motion to adjourn would be in order, Your Worship.
Moved by Councillor Barry, seconded by Councillor Chaboyer. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you very much, everyone. Now back to the